Welcome back. You're watching Morning Brief at 9. The countdown for Budget 2025 has begun and the Halwa ceremony was conducted on Friday by Nirmala Sitharaman, the Finance Minister, and the entire Finance Ministry. But is there going to be more Halwa, and is the Halwa going to taste sweet for the middle class is something that all eyes are on right now. With just 5 days to go for the Union Budget, today on the show we discuss, will Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman offer a magic bullet for the middle class? And will she bite the bullet when it comes to tax reduction for tax-paying citizens in India? Well, let's put this into perspective first. Now, what is it that we know for sure right now as a key driver to decide on the trajectory of India's economic growth vis-a-vis taxation? Well, to begin with, the GDP growth for India has slowed down, and boosting consumption at this stage is a key to revival. So there's not just a feeling for the middle class, presumably, that Finance Minister would have, but there would also be this, hopefully, this ultimate objective of reviving the economy on the basis of consumption. Now, why is consumption important? Well, consumption is important because private consumption makes 60% of India's GDP. Now, we've seen urban demand has been in decline for the last almost 5 quarters or so. So, urban demand is something which drives consumption, and that has been in decline for 5 quarters. And with that, the double whammy is that household savings are also at their lowest level. Add to this the pain of the middle class with corporate increments, if at all there are, unable to cover for inflation. And inflation, remember, has been coming in hot. Add to that taxpayers. Well, just some data here. Taxpayers have doubled from 3.35 crore to 7.54 crore in the last 10 years. But while this tax collection and the number of people paying taxes is high, it has doubled, those who pay zero income tax or nil returns have gone up 3 times, from about 1.7 crore to 4.73 crore. Corporate tax, which is taxed at a rate lower than the highest slab of individual income tax, those collections have gone up just 83%, from 5.56 lakh crore to 10.2 lakh crore in the last 5 years. Personal income tax collection in the same period, however, have gone up 141%, from 4.92 crore lakh rupees to almost 12 lakh crore rupees. Now, the middle class is obviously the bearer of the brunt of everything that happens, and it is not just taxes. Even the job market continues to be thin. Like I told you, inflation is eating into salary, and with that there is frustration over high taxation. Now, there's not just taxation by terms of the direct income tax that you pay, there is also the indirect taxes, or GST, which is on pretty much everything that you consume, from your popcorns to the 28% GST that you pay on SUVs. And then I told you the nil taxpayers are the ones who are bearing the brunt, and hence there are fewer taxpayers to share the burden of economic growth. Well, is there a real case for Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman to cut taxes this year? Joining me to discuss this are 2 very special guests right now. I have Riaz, Thingna, tax partner, Grand Thornton, Bharat, as well as Anita, Rastogi, principal, Price Waterhouse, joining me this morning. Thank you so much both for being here on Morning Brief at 9. Riaz, let me start with you. Direct taxation, middle class being the biggest contributor when it comes to direct tax collection for the government from the individual tax category. Is there a real case, like many are demanding and expecting this time, for the nil tax bracket to go up to 10 lakh rupees of income?
Yeah, thank you. First of all, thank you for having me. Yes, there is always a case for the middle class, because the middle class, as you rightly pointed out, bears the burden of taxation on the non-corporate side. Uh, a couple of things that also indicate that there will be some relief. I think in some press interactions, the government sources have claimed that at least they are planning to have some tax relief for income below 15 lakhs of rupees. So there are indicators that there will be some uh, improvement as far as tax rates are concerned. Uh, but the asks are a lot more. But we should also keep in mind the fact that the government has announced a comprehensive review of the Income Tax Act 22 committees have been set up. Some 6,500 odd comments have come in from the stakeholders. Now, with that, that whole process should take a year to complete. And in the meantime, we will have a few changes which are made, but some of the larger changes will come in also when the comprehensive review takes place, where rationalization changes should be coming in. The asks in the meantime from the middle class are quite a few. One is reduction of the tax rates, widening of the tax slabs, increasing the limit from of 80C deductions to 3.5 lakhs, etc. Uh, One interesting demand which has been coming in is the need to have joint tax returns between husband and wife.
Right.
I, that is something which is going on. So let's see what the finance minister has in store for us.
Right. If I can just bring you back in here, Anita, I'll just come to you in a minute. But Riaz, if I can just stay with you for a little longer, while these demands are there and these expectations are there, how realistic are these expectations in your mind? And do you think there is time for the government now to actually focus not as much on tax collection by way of bringing the fiscal deficit in control, but actually go for growth, which has been faltering? So is there a real case, even from the point of view of the exchequer, to actually go ahead and give this consumption boost to the economy?
No, definitely. Besides, yes, to boost the consumption, yes, you know that inflation has been high. There has been some reduction or some control of inflation in the last 2 quarters, but there is high inflation, and definitely there is a huge need for the middle class to have more money in hand. And as you rightly pointed out, the consumption levels have gone down. Retail consumption has gone down. The largest consumer is the strong middle class. I think the need for having these reliefs is very real. I think the government has a case for it because the direct tax collections have risen year on year, and even this year it is showing a rise. I think if I remember right, some 11.7% is the collection of direct tax as a percentage of GDP. So I think the stage is there for the government to have the flexibility to give some reliefs. They have also indicated that they are interested in providing relief at least to the income below to assessees with income less than 15 lakhs. So I think there is a real case for reduction, some tweeting on the personal tax side.
All right. Well, let's hope that what you're saying is something that Finance Minister is also thinking on the lines of. But Anita, if I can bring you into this conversation now, there is also this indirect component of taxation, which is by way of GST, duties, customs, pretty much everything that you pay to the government after you have paid the tax on your salary or on your income, as the case may be. But with this cut in taxes and hopefully more disposable income available in the hands of the consumer, there is going to be a fillip for the government's indirect tax collection as well when it comes to all the increased consumption activity that lower taxes could lead to. So help us understand, how does this work, and why it is imperative for the finance minister to take into account the indirect taxation as a default benefit of reduction in direct taxes?
No, absolutely. I think there's a clear direct correlation in the fact that if I have got more disposable income with my hand, I can definitely buy more goods. And if I buy more goods, the consumption increases. And when we talk about consumption, there is already tax embedded on that which goes to the government. But I think I'll come over here from a larger perspective that, and I do believe that India today is expecting a lot of bold announcements from the government. And why I say the bold announcements from the government is not just that government has to look at the growth. Today we are at a stage of a little bit of a geopolitical uncertainty, which is where it is so critical and important for the government that from an indirect tax perspective, which is the customs specifically, when I talk about in the budget, because customs is something which is going to be impacted big time, is with regard to the various imports which India does. Now, there is where the government has to be mindful of the fact that because of the a lot of uncertainty happening across the world, we know that globalization helps a lot of things, but because of uncertainty, there is a challenge over there. So that is where the government has to focus. That is one. The second thing is, today we look at India as a prime hub for a lot of these global capability centers being formed. Now, GCC is a great thing which is happening for India. Now, which essentially means that there are foreign companies who set up their establishment in India to provide services from India, which actually
Right.
gives a lot of employment to India, a lot of consumption, etc. So, which is where I think that the government should come up with some very good tax policy for boosting that GCC growth as well,
Right.
which could be as simple as giving a GST refunds faster, right?
Right.
The other thing I would like to talk about is the climate. Now, climate is such an important aspect which government cannot overlook. Now, with giving the commitment to achieve a net zero by 2070, things like e-mobility. Now, that is the one aspect which the government should take care of, where you really need to reduce the customs duty on a lot of these EV
That's
components,
right.
right? Which is important for the manufacture of EV vehicles, etc., to be used in India. And it should also have a GST alignment that in the entire value chain the GST should also not be really a cost. And hence, the ultimate benefit of the fact that e mobility is something which is being prioritized by the government and used by the consumers should be considered.
Absolutely, I agree
Then,
with you. I think you're talking, Anita, about the inverted duty structure, where in the case of EVs particularly, the tax on input that goes into making the final product is much higher than the tax on the final product itself. So, of course, and on climate, I think I can just say that the climate has changed around climate talks ever since Donald Trump has come into office in the US. But let me bring in Adhil Shetty, CEO BankBazaar, into this conversation. Adhil, good morning. Nice to have you back on News 9. Now, we are living in a world right now where there is this anticipation of tariffs. In fact, US President Donald Trump has already gone ahead and is threatening tariffs on Colombia. Colombia saying it's going to charge 50% tariff on US. Now, with this entire tariff narrative, the dollar is becoming strong, the rupee is weakening. FPIs are exiting Indian markets. Consumption, as we just discussed, has been low, but then even bank deposits are low, suggesting that there isn't really too much money available in the hands of taxpayers to go ahead and either save or go ahead and consume. Now, what I want to ask you is that there is also this talk that perhaps instruments like fixed deposits, a pure play, safer option to invest in a debt product, is actually taxed at par with your ongoing tax slab. The interest on fixed deposits gets added to your income. Is there a case for fixed deposits also to be seen to be taxed as market linked products like equities and debt?
So, fixed deposits are always considered to be low risk, safe instruments which have always been taxed at the marginal tax rate. So, I think that's going to be a little bit of a tough one. However, your point, Kartik, is absolutely critical. There's a lot of, uncertainty out there, and we need to put more money in people's hands, right? And I think an ideal way of looking how to do that, because we're both saying the same thing, how do we get people into more money into people's hands, is relook at the inflation adjustments of all the tax brackets that have been there. The 30% tax bracket, which is the one that you mentioned, the 15 lakh limit was set in 2020.
That's
now,
right.
there's been a 21% inflation since then. So that means the bracket needs to go to 18 lakh. That would save people a considerable amount of money. Secondly, there's a ask saying the tax-free limit or the level to which you don't pay taxes, can that be increased from 7.5 lakhs to maybe a few lakhs higher? And lastly, right, I think we have seen with the BankBazaar Aspiration Index some amount of slowdown in the new tax regime into these specific life insurance, term life insurance, ELSS, NPS. And we believe it's happening, right? Because now in the new regime, which everyone is migrating to, you don't have a deduction. So we're saying, can we just have a flat deduction? The whole point of the new regime was simplicity.
Right.
So let's keep it simple, but let's give a, 30% of your income up to 15 lakhs, you'll be allowed to take as a deduction.
Right.
So I think we somehow need to get more money into people's hands, Kartik.
More money into people's hands, and like you rightly pointed out, Adhil, there also needs to be greater simplicity in filing taxes and calculating how much you owe the government. Let me bring in Riaz at this moment. Riaz, old tax regime, new tax regime. If I remember correctly, the new tax regime was started and there was supposed to be this sort of, step up approach where gradually the old tax regime fades away. But we haven't seen that happen in the last 5 years. There are people who still continue to take tax deduction on their investments. But now is it time to either merge or completely do away with the old tax regime?
So while we say that, it hasn't completely happened, I think today about 72% of the assessees are
on the new tax regime.
Yeah, they're using the new tax regime. So it has kind of become the default tax regime as such. But, doing away with the old tax regime may not be very fair because people having carry forward losses and other claims, they may still find it useful to continue with that regime. I think it'll die a natural death over a period of time. But in the meantime, I think I don't see it being merged completely immediately.
Okay, you don't see it getting merged. Anita, Rastogi, now custom duty on gold, this is something that had been introduced last year, and of course, the 5% custom duty is something which perhaps did not fulfill the objectives with which the government really started out to introduce those duties. So do you think there's going to be any change in the custom duty on gold in budget 2025?
So I personally believe that rate rationalization in the customs duty is the ask again from the government. Although the government did a lot of rate reductions and rationalization in 2023, but even today, we have 12 slab rates. I mean, why do we want so many rates? Because of that, one is that the ultimate product becomes expensive. Hence, there is less consumption by the middle class or anybody else for that matter. And also, there are a lot of classification disputes. So I think it is an apt time for the government to look at all these rate rationalization in customs in a big way. Also, I would like to say that the government must look at trade facilitation, which is so critical and important. Why do we have so much of time which takes place for customs clearance of the goods? Those things should be done rapidly and in a much faster manner, so that the businesses are able to take the benefit of this ease of doing business. I think the thought is there, but I don't think a lot of steps have still been done which can be done in the customs aspect.
Okay, a lot more needs to be done is the word coming in from Anita Rastogi. But Adhil, let me bring you back into this conversation and let's talk briefly about corporate tax. While, we as middle-class tax-paying citizens often don't think much about corporate taxes, but then let's face it, corporate taxes will have a direct bearing on job creation and the kind of investments that corporate India will make. Now, we are living in a high interest rate regime. We don't know what the new RBI governor is going to do soon after the budget in his first MPC and the first for this calendar year as well. So is there a case for corporate tax rates to actually go down while the middle class sitting on the outside wants corporate taxes to go up because they feel that at 25% corporates are not paying as much as the highest paying middle class Indian. But is there a case for reduction in corporate taxes to what we call unleash the animal spirits and get job creation going?
I think, Donald Trump has told us or shown us that anything is possible. And I think what we've seen in India before, Kartik, is specific sectors or segments, like, for example, startups, like, for example, MSMEs, or someone who set up a new manufacturing facility. We have seen them being given an incentive in terms of a lower corporate tax rate. Whether that'll happen across the board, especially at a time where, the middle class is hurting, remains to be seen. However, I think the biggest thing corporates want, right, and maybe I can talk as BankBazaar from the fintech sector. See, we have a lot of talk and a lot of money going into physical infrastructure, 11.11 lakh crores last year.
Yeah.
Now, that money needs to be fully spent. So I think that is item number one. That spend in infrastructure is going to benefit everyone. But today, Kartik, the RBI put out a report, the digital economy is 1/5 of Indian GDP in 2025. We need the same investment in digital infra. By digital infra, I'm talking about, we've done a great job with UPI and Aadhaar.
Right.
We need investment in DigiLocker. We need investment in account aggregator. We need investment in a national financial information register, which has fraud and credit data. So I think there's an incredible opportunity to say that even if you can't cut the corporate tax rate, let's make sure that all of the money that is being spent on infrastructure, be it physical infrastructure or digital infrastructure, we make it very, very easy and fast, right? For both normal physical businesses and digital businesses to scale over the next 10 years.
Okay, investments in digital infrastructure as much as physical infrastructure. Well, while I agree with you theoretically, I'm not too sure, Adhil, how many jobs digital infrastructure and investments therein will create versus the jobs that physical infrastructure like building ports and airports and railway stations and highways will. But I think it's a valid ask. Let's see what Finance Minister has in store. So we have a wish list coming in from Adhil Shetty. Let me get a wish list from Riaz as well. Riaz, one practical wish list or one practical aspect that you want Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman to address in Budget 2025?
Yeah, I think the biggest ask is towards simplification and rationalization.
Okay.
The first one I would say would be TDS. Now, TDS was introduced, for two reasons. One is to plug tax leaks, and the other was to create a transaction trail.
Right.
That transaction trail is no longer really valid with all the digital tools that the government has at its disposal. Now, in the meantime, around 40 sections have come up under the TDS regime, varying rates of TDS 0.1% to 40%.
Right.
It has become very complex. There's been a lot of litigation on interpretational issues, etc. So I think that is one thing that needs to be
Addressed by Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman.
Absolutely, because
Right.
Around 3 or 4 sections contribute to about 85% of the TDS collection.
Absolutely.
Cut it down and reduce it. I think that is one. And I think the second part, which is very important, is to ease the appeal scheme.
Right.
Appeals, the timing of the
Right.
appeals is very important.
Appeals, simplifying and strengthening the appeals process. Anita, Rastogi, last word to you, and it's actually a pointed question, so I'm not sure if I'm being fair or not, but the pointed question being that between GDP growth and fiscal prudence, what should be Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman's priority for Budget 2025?
Yeah, so I don't think that I'll be able to give you an absolutely exact answer on that, but I think I still want to show my wish list, to you as to what are the things which she should be doing.
Sure.
3 things which I would like to focus. One is that apart from trade facilitation, she should look at trade promotion. Today is a time to promote the trade. Facilitation is fine, ease of doing business, all of that you're doing, and there's much more to be done. Second thing is that, there are cases in GST where the taxpayers have gone to the courts, and in Supreme Court they've got favorable orders. And now is a time when the GST Council does a meeting and they say, hey, we are going to do a retrospective amendment from July 27, from July when the GST was announced. And that I think really just gives a very, very wrong impression that, the taxpayer has gone and fought it before the Supreme Court. The benefit is something which you don't want to give. I think those are the things which should kind of be avoided at this point of time. And I think the last thing is the FTAs. The foreign trade agreements are something which should be signed with many, many more countries, and a proper benefit should be given to the Indian importers in order to do a lot of manufacturing in India, boost the manufacturing, and thereafter export from India. I think these are my 3 key wish lists.
All right, well, let's leave it at that. Anita, Rastogi, Riaz, Thingna and Adhil Shetty, thank you so much for taking our time. We will, of course, have all of you back with us on Budget Day, but for now, let's leave it at that.